Hello, dear students. Welcome to our today's lesson, The Value of a Map, from the startup J Corp. Startups are hot. We're seeing not only more entrepreneurial business emerge in the 21st century, but also a more diverse group of startups. Beside the college students, recent graduates, and serial entrepreneurs who have always occupied this space, a variety of other participants are becoming more numerous. Corporate executives fleeing the world of big business to create something on their own. Brilliant young people whose first or second jobs may be with startups. So please, my fellow students, consider getting a job, your first job, within a startup. You would learn hugely. Refugees from non-profit, government, and other sectors who are attracted to this entrepreneurial venture. Additionally, startup fever is spreading geographically throughout the US and into the world. It's not limited to Silicon Valley, Austin, or Seattle. Now, startup incubators and accelerators are popping up in Pittsburgh, Chicago, Barcelona, Mexico City, Shanghai, Tel Aviv, Sao Paulo, Sydney, and Bangalore now rank among the world's top 20 startup ecosystems, according to the Startup Genome Project. In addition, entrepreneurs are launching these new businesses at a time of great volatility and unpredictability. In our increasingly global digital universe, nothing stays the same for long. Trends come and go with lightning speed. New dominant companies emerge seemingly out of nowhere, and what's state of the art today becomes hopelessly outmoded tomorrow. Startups are hard, very, very hard. They will likely test your creativity, perseverance, courage, intelligence, emotions, and character. Your relationships will also be tested, both within your company and with your family and friends. More than once, you are likely to be spent physically, emotionally, mentally, and financially. This course will provide you with the guidance in bad times as well as good. It will give you a clear roadmap that will help you navigate the treacherous startup terrain and make the journey to success as smooth and efficient as possible. This course will help you know with some level of certainty exactly where you are and what you need to be focusing on. I also try to expose the many myths that are associated with startups, and I'll try to point out the areas where you may need to alter your ingrained beliefs and patterns of thinking to increase the odds of both you and your startup being successful, more so than even before. Startups require a map to chart a course through innumerable and significant obstacles. As you'll discover, a map is exactly what this course will provide. We have seen a glimpse of that maps with the math framework. Know where you've been, where are you now, and where you're going. Startups aren't as random and chaotic as they might appear. If I've learned nothing else after many years of doing startups, is that they begin, progress, and end in predictable ways. On a granular level, of course, the unexpected often happens. A funding source suddenly dries up, and a new customer appears seemingly out of nowhere. If you take the long view, however, you can see patterns to startups, patterns that can prove invaluable to entrepreneurs, providing perspective and assisting in decision making. These patterns provide a map that entrepreneurs can follow, and this map can make the difference between failure and success, between making a small and a large profit, and between having a flash in the pan business and a sustainable one. The value of this course is that it will help you become familiar with the startup path, the entrepreneurial path, the entrepreneurial skills. It will show you the makers along the way that will identify your particular point in the process and the best actions to take at this point. You learn, for instance, what to do when your initial product falters, a common startup occurrence. You will also learn when to use the knowledge gleaned from the failing product to introduce iterative and eventually more successful versions of the original. Once you know where you are on the startup path, you are much better able to know what your next steps should be, as well as the common but avoidable mistakes often made at a particular point on the path. This knowledge is hugely valuable tactically, but it's equally important psychologically. Too often entrepreneurs give up prematurely when faced with surmountable obstacles, and they move forward aggressively when they should stop, reflect, and recreate. So remember, stop, reflect, and recreate. Psychologically speaking, and this is something for your entrepreneurial psychological skills, some entrepreneurs fold their businesses because it seems all is lost. When they are aware of the reality, they've just hit a speed bump. They can process a predicament, see it in context, and move forward, rather than calling it quits. Similarly, some entrepreneurs take enormous and often unnecessary risks because they are caught up in the startup mentality. They believe they must be overly aggressive if they're going to be successful. In fact, there are times to be aggressive and times to be conservative. If they know where they are on the startup map, they can respond appropriately. Consider too that in the startup universe, you always have more tasks to accomplish than time or resources to do. The scarcity of resources is often extreme, given the enormity of the mission, so efficiency becomes a critical discipline. Therefore, allocating the right amount of money and energy to the right tasks and the right moment is crucial. With a map in hand, this allocation is much easier to do than when you're flying by the seat of your pants and potentially flailing in too many directions. We will call this map the J curve, and I'll help you become more familiar with these components shortly. First out, I'd like to tell you about the startup journey that helped open my eyes to the concept of the J curve. No straight line from start to finish. In 2007, my business partner David Heman and I helped Sarah Sonnenfeld launch a startup, a company that focused on connecting people who wanted to work from home with employers who supported remote workers. Since my own company, Love to Know, was a virtual organization, I knew from first-hand experience the value of working from home and that a huge untapped pool of talent preferred this option to an on-site office job. We were all incredibly excited. I knew Sarah was the perfect one to lead a company because she's smart, effective, tenacious, and a hard worker. I witnessed these qualities when she did some marketing consulting for me. I'd love to know. She also founded another startup called Jobs Direct, so she knew the job space. Sarah was a multi tool player who could cover wide swaths of responsibility. Perhaps more importantly, she is a wonderful human being whom any savvy angel investor would trust. We teamed her up with an incredibly talented local engineer and another skilled engineer from India who helped with the original coding. With great optimism, we released our first product, a curated selection of work from home jobs. Our proposed business model resembled that of other online companies, featuring job sites. We charge prospective employers to post jobs and obtain access to our pool of job seekers. Soon after the launch, however, we discovered that HR departments were tough prospective customers. They didn't have much money, and they were not inclined to try new things. Generally, they were also suspicious of and resistant to the work at home market. Despite our best efforts, we weren't having much success. While Sarah maintained her optimism and persevered, the company was rapidly running out of money and not showing enough traction. Traction is a key word to justify investing more money. We plodded on for a few more months, but were becoming more and more dejected, and then we discussed ending the venture. Before doing so, we asked a simple question: is there anything we are doing that is working? Sarah pointed out that we had a huge number of job seekers who had created accounts and that they liked our site. As we reflected and discussed the situation, we recognized that we had proven at least one of our hypotheses. There was a huge untapped work from home labor market. They wanted and needed good jobs. Many competitive sites offering these remote jobs were often outright scams. In order to work at home and make some money per day, you have to first buy the course kit. No doubt once these sites sold the kit, customers were disappointed their, with their subsequent job results. Stay at home moms and others in our target market wanted real jobs, and we were one of the only sites that had them all in one place. So we decided to turn the model completely upside down, and instead of charging the prospective employers for job listings, we would charge the job seekers a monthly subscription. Because we made our service free to these employers, we began receiving great access to all of their remote jobs. Sarah and her team quickly put up a test where we charge a nominal fee of $15 per month for job seekers to use our site. We often obtained sign-ups immediately, and after a week we became convinced that we could make real revenue. Today, Flex Jobs is going gangbusters under Sarah's adept leadership, and the technical prowess of the incredible talent CTO Peter Hansman. And perhaps most importantly, we have helped over 1 million job seekers in their search for remote and flexible work. We experienced a similar pattern with other companies in which we invested. Before FlexJobs, I had assumed that most successful companies develop their business plan and went with it until it passed or failed. What I came to realize, however, is that the entire journey is a process. The product and associated business model is really simply a hypothesis, not a hard and fast product launch, and the results are not pass, fail, or black and white, but instead produce feedback, providing essential information that decreases the odds of success. I had an epiphany. Iterations count more than the original idea. Feedback counts more than the sales numbers. And flexibility and agility are more important than commitment to the original idea. The straight line from startup to sustainable success is largely a myth. True, of course, there are exceptions to this rule. Instead, startups usually follow a path that resembles the letter J. The 6 phases of the J curve. The shape of the 6-phase curve suggests what differentiates it from other startup models. That is why I like this model a lot. As you can see, the base of the J represents the dip that occurs shortly after a company is launched. At first, the power of the business idea captures everyone's imagination, and it garners money, team members, and other forms of support. Then reality sets in. Products take longer to develop than expected. Customers don't embrace the initial offering the way that was anticipated. The business model doesn't quite work, and eventually money starts drying up. These are all tough hits to take, especially if you're not prepared for them. Therefore, the dip is represented by the base of the J, and it's where the startup figure it out or they die. I call it the long, cold winter, or if I am feeling more morose, the valley of death. Much of this course is dedicated to giving you strategies and tactics to get you and your startup through that difficult period. Because once you are thought it, you are into the step upward slope of the J, and that is where the bulk of the value creation happens. This curve is a reflection of startup reality rather than an idealized progression. Each of the phases listed in chronological order reflect the challenges and opportunities that arise for all types of startups as they evolve. With this curve as your guide, you will be able to put your startup's experiences and knowledge in context and have a better sense of what to do in response to these challenges and opportunities. We'll look at each phase in depth. For our purposes here, so I'd like to provide you with a short snapshot of each phase. Phase 1. Create. See. This first phase of a startup may seem self-evident, but numerous nuances exist that, if address can get you off to a great rather than a fatally flawed start. In the great phase, the three key elements are the idea, the team, and the money. Not all entrepreneurial ideas are created equal. Some are much better than others, and entrepreneurs need to recognize that the best ideas aren't manufactured, that superior technology does not automatically produce superior products, and that products succeed because they solve, this is key, real problems or provide real new opportunities. Write that on. So, in this phase, startups must identify an idea that is going to be worthy of the entrepreneur investing their life's energy, not to mention their savings. Similarly, they must raise money, like the Dickens. Underestimating the amount of funds needed is a common failing. Contrary to what some entrepreneurs may believe, this is one of the best times to raise money from various sources. I like to characterize this initial phase as dreams unburdened by reality. It can often be easier to raise funds while the excitement runs high and the story is virginal, as opposed to trying to do so when confronted by often unforeseen challenges later in the process. The team too can be a tricky proposition. Rugged individualism is a philosophy many entrepreneurs embrace, yet it can be counterproductive to startup success. Putting together the strongest possible team with complementary skills and character traits is crucial. Mistakes here will be hard to undo. Having a strong team of co-founders often serves startups better than solo entrepreneurs. Getting it right will make the endeavor both more successful and a lot more fun. Phase 2, Release, the R. Once a team, idea, and money are in place, it's time to get the initial product out there. In this phase, some entrepreneurs suffer from procrastination and or perfectionism. These are the enemies. You have to push products into the market even when your impulse is to do more research, tinker with their formulation, or build more features. After the product release, the most successful startups are the ones who listen the hardest. They pay close attention to what customers are telling them, both positive and negative feedback, and use it in the next phase. During release, entrepreneurs can get too low or too high. They can throw in the towel because of a negative response or expand frantically because of a positive one. Phase 3, Morph, the M. In most endeavors, people generally don't hit home runs their first time at bat. Generally, they don't get it right until they've had sufficient experiences, including failures, and learned from them. The same is true for startups, and that's why the morph phase is so essential. In certain ways, it is the most important phase. This is where entrepreneurs take the feedback they've received after launching their initial product and make improvements, iterate and or pivot. The goal here is to be flexible enough to move beyond the original idea and either make it better or use it as a stepping stone to something related but different. Admittedly, this can be difficult. Entrepreneurs tend to fall in love with their original ideas, and in this phase they may need to alter or even largely abandon them. The keys to moving efficiently through this phase are to listen and respond to customer feedback. It may be harsh, but it's true. and produce one or more fundamental changes, which I refer to as morphs, as fast as you can. By adapting in this manner, you increase the odds of finding a product that thrills your customers and also your investors. Phase 4 Model, the M. In this phase, you'll focus on nailing the business model. Your goal is to reach the point where if you put more investment money into the business, more cash will be generated. You need to get to the point where it's obvious that this company will generate cash at some certain point. You do this by knowing and driving down all your costs, customer acquisition, engineering, and so on, at the same time maximizing your revenue. This is a great time for implementing a five, the five generic strategies that we will review later. The Holy Grail is a large positive operating margin and concomitant large positive cash flow. You may decide to invest all of that positive cash flow into growth, and that's okay. But you should be honestly convinced the business model can and will generate cash. Otherwise, you don't yet have a business. This, my friends, is crucial. Last week, I was in a business meeting with some entrepreneurs and a startup. He has a great company with a lot of members, a decent web page and app, but he is not generating any sort of cash. So the investors pointed that out to him. He was kind of disappointed. But it's a harsh truth. If you don't generate cash, you don't yet have a business. Please keep that in mind. Phase 5 Scale. Yes. The scale phase is where much of the substantial value is typically created for investors. However, this can be a tricky stage for some entrepreneurs in that they need to leave behind their small and insular mentality and build out the company. More specifically, this is the phase where you assemble the people, processes, and money necessary to take the company to the next level. You've morphed effectively. You've nailed the business model. Now it's time to tell the world about it, blow it out in the marketplace, and make something big. This is where your product and company can make its mark on the world, or as Steve Jobs liked to say, put a dent in the universe. It also happens to be the best place to make real money. Here, you must put in place a proper infrastructure to have a larger company. This requires new people, new processes, new strategies, and usually new money. The challenge may be that you like the people and processes that have gotten you this far, and you don't like the notion of major change, a requirement of the scale phase. Another interesting challenge is receiving and accepting a low-ball buyout offer. Having experienced tough times and facing the challenge of rapidly growing your business, you may be tempted to sell at the beginning of this critical juncture, just before adding significant value to the world and substantial wealth to your bank account. Phase 6 Harvest, the H. At this point in the life cycle, you are transitioning from startup to a fully established business. As the name of this phase suggests, it's often time for entrepreneurs to reap what they've sown. This is a good thing, but it's also a complex one. At this point, the startup is reaching maturity, and a lot of challenging decisions must be made. Should you expand through acquisition or organically? Should you take a great buyout offer? Should you provide liquidity to investors through a buyback, IPO, or company sale? This is a major transition point for the company, one where entrepreneurs need to think long and hard about short-term and long-term objectives. Major financial questions arise in this phase, and how to invest in the brand as well as additional products is a crucial one. In addition, this may be the time for entrepreneurs to cash out or step aside, while for others it's an opportunity for continued personal growth by diving into the challenge of taking the company into another sphere. To make these tough decisions, recognize how your entrepreneurial vision is coloring your decision making and get past the biased perspective to determine what's best for the long-term interest of the company, including investors, employees, customers, and you personally, key stakeholders. Harvest should be a fun time to no matter what you decide. You move past the life or death choices and instead face puffball decisions. Heads you win, tails you win more. Putting these phases to work. iSoccerPath is a startup that offers high school athletes an education and evaluation service to guide families and players through the process of becoming a student athlete. The program is designed to facilitate Division I college acceptance and scholarships for elite high school soccer players. By offering everything from player portfolio assembly, training and videos, iSoccerPath makes the brutally competitive and usually confusing process of becoming a college athlete easier to navigate. The market of parents seeking an edge for their soccer player children is sizable and receptive to these services offered by iSoccerPath. Relatively early in the life of the startup, iSoccerPath CEO Jeff J came to see me to discuss global expansion, new products and services, and franchising possibilities. Like many entrepreneurs during the early phases of the J curve, he was flying on adrenaline, kept aloft by his dream of what the business could become. Buoyed by iSoccerPath's positive initial reception, Jeff was naturally excited. But as I pointed out to him, he was putting the cart before the horse, or, in startup terms, his thinking was phase 5 scale when he was in phase 3 morph. By showing Jeff the J curve, I was able to help him recognize that he was in morph, but that his head was awash in scaling opportunities. Further, I suggested that the phase appropriate activities were continuing to iterate his service, refine his product offering, obtain more customer traction, and then focus on the business and revenue model. Once he had accomplished these tasks successfully, he could move on and address the scaling opportunities that were already coming his way if they still made sense. I helped him understand that better of the pace is bad for the business. If he were to focus his attention on scaling opportunities at this point in time, he would not only neglect another crucial task, such as creating new and better iterations, but he would also jump on opportunities before the company had matured efficiently to take best advantage of them. Engaging in phase 5 and 6 activities when you are starting phase 3 is virtually certain to result in misery and likely to endanger the startup. I also note that being out of phase is bad for an entrepreneur's health. Running a startup is an endurance test. It's highly stressful physically, financially, and emotionally. Therefore, entrepreneurs need to pace themselves. When they attempt to do the work of the wrong phases at the wrong time, or try and do multiple phase tasks simultaneously. They are doing too much. Burnout is real danger. Very real danger. I know a lot of entrepreneurs who suffered from burnout in their second or third step of the J curve. And the J curve helps entrepreneurs guard against it by working phase by phase. Entrepreneurs keep their workload manageable and focused, and thus are able to manage their stress more effectively. Jeff followed my advice, which is rare. In entrepreneurs, they rarely follow advices and turn down all offers to partner or affiliate with all newcomers for at least 12 months. They successfully complete a beta of 12 families in all age groups, and soon after their official launch, got 19 clubs with over 12,000 soccer players to become part of the education program. iSoccerPath is now ramping up the sign-ups, and with the steady, more measured growth model, they are getting a lot of investor attention. Getting the order right after getting it wrong is not unusual for entrepreneurs to get ahead of themselves. Like Jeff from iSoccerPath, they are aggressive and opportunistic, their pace accelerated by their hopes and dreams. Doing things in the wrong order, however, is one of the surest ways of sabotaging your startup, and doing them in the right J-curve order is one of the best ways of ensuring its success. Consider two of the most common chronology mistakes. Focusing on the business model before figuring out the product. Scaling before nailing the product or business model. You're likely to make the first mistake because when you explain your new idea to people, you'll be prepped with questions such as, how are you going to make money at that? While you don't want to ignore that question completely, the real questions to ask yourself are, can I make something people will really want? And can I get customers to actually use my product or service? Because if you can get people to use your product or service, then you are not going to make any money at it anyway. What history generally has proven is that if you can get customer traction, you can find a way to make money. By focusing too much on the revenue model, you may be creating a myopic view of what your idea should be and blocking yourself from considering some important paths for evolving your initial idea. However, it might be one of those alternative paths or a later iteration that brings you the most customer traction. In addition, you waste valuable time being overly focused on the business model early on because you don't yet know what the actual product will be. You may go through 2, 3 or more iterations of the product, and by the nth iteration, the model you created for the first iteration will be hopelessly inappropriate. Paradoxically, emphasizing a business model prematurely, you may block yourself from the best money-making opportunities. You structure the company in a certain way and hire people with certain types of experience to capitalize on the first product. Most organizations are insufficiently agile to shift as their product shifts, so they may have the right product but the wrong business model. It's only when you gain significant customer traction with a product iteration and you are through the more phase that you should spend significant time on the business model. Avoiding this mistake requires patience, a virtue that some entrepreneurs find is in short supply. To develop these patience, take an important lesson from Google. In 1997, when they launched Google, founders Sergey Brin and Larry Page were still Stanford University students. The search engine market was quite crowded with myriad participants, but Brin and Page were convinced that they could make a far better one that treated links coming into a site or page as indications of what the site was about and its quality. They devoted the vast majority of their time perfecting their search algorithm and were rewarded about a year later when PC Magazine named Google as the top search engine. 4 months after winning this award, they made the first non-tech hire, Omid Kordestani, who became their head of sales and focused on revenue and the business model. It wasn't until September 1999, almost 2 years after they launched the product, that Google rolled out AdWords, which became the company's primary revenue source and foundational to its business model. No doubt, Brin and Page knew they had something special 2 years before they focused on revenue, and they did not have some rough idea that advertising was a likely source of that revenue. But they also thought that co-branded search, possibly through licensing their technology, was a revenue source. It must have been tempting to move ahead quickly and place large, ugly display ads before they perfect their product. That's what Yahoo and other dominant search engines were doing at the time. Instead, Google demonstrated greater patience, pursued the perfection of search, gained a huge loyal following, and only then focused on their business model, and were rewarded in a way that startup founders can only dream about. Consciously or not, they understood that if they nailed search, they could wait until the time was right to create a focus on the business model. The second mistake, scaling before nailing the product and business model, can devastate a startup financially. It's common for a company that is in the release or more phase to decide that they need to implement an ambitious growth plan and the infrastructure that goes with it. In fact, they often think if they can simply scale up marketing, customer acceptance will come. While it's quite possible if they wait X number of months, they'll be ready for the scale phase and can implement this plan effectively. Implementing it prematurely before all the pieces are in place is highly perilous. Whatever flaws still exist in the product and the business model can prove fatal when scaling occurs prematurely. Scaling a flawed business model that's small turns into a flawed business model that's big. Instead of bleeding a little money, you're now hemorrhaging major cash and eventually you'll slam into a wall. In many instances, this mistake is made because a startup has too much money early on. If you recall the late 90s tech boom, you remember how dot-coms scaled shortly after their inception because money was pouring into their coffers. Even the dot-com busts hadn't happened, many of them would have gone under because they were scaling before they had nailed the business model. And in fact, a number of them had not even nailed the product. Unfortunately, an overabundance of funds encourages sloppy behavior and can create the illusion that anything is possible, including ill-timed hyper-expansion. To avoid this mistake, follow the sequence of the phases with nearly religious devotion. While valid exceptions to the sequencing may exist, They are atypical, so think long and hard before you try to skip a phase. Scale when it's time to scale, and not before, no matter how much money you have or what the competition is doing. From a financial perspective, you want to preserve your cash during the create, release, morph, and model phases, since you're going to need it no matter how well things go initially. For startups, negative financial surprises are par for the course, so you want to be physically conservative at least until you reach the scale phase. We don't need no stinking plan. If you're like many entrepreneurs, you may not place much value on plans and models. The J curve and its 6 phases may appear to be overly programmatic, restricting your ability to be spontaneous and instinctive. This is not the point of the J curve, and it provides plenty of room for entrepreneurial creativity. In fact, the J curve makes it easier to act boldly, quickly, and innovatively because it lets you know where your focus should be at given moment in time. When you know what the key objectives are in the release phase, for instance, you're not distracted by myriad unrelated issues that might otherwise seem pressing and overwhelming. You can productively concentrate on a handful of key assignments rather than scores of them, giving yourself the opportunity to devote your full attention and creativity to them. As important as business plans can be, the J curve isn't that type of highly structured nuts and bolts framework. Rather, I encourage you to look at your startup as a journey. The J curve is a map to get you from start to success in the most efficient, efficacious, and safe manner possible. With it, you'll have higher odds of success, and you'll get there sooner. It offers you directions to get to your destination. Ideally great, Google-like success. But you choose the route you take, set your speed, and determine the vehicle that will get you there. Though you may be the most iconoclastic of entrepreneurs, you hate bureaucracy, meetings, strategies. You probably also hate what happens when you run into unexpected trouble. Suddenly you find yourself short of money, dealing with customer complaints, or struggling with product acceptance. Nothing prepared you for this crisis point, and you need guidance. The J curves provides it. As the German field marshal Helmut von Moltke once said, no plan survives contact with the enemy, or in this case, reality. Significant problems and challenges hit every startup, and when that happens, the J curve allows you to view and address the problems within a reality-based context. Whether your funding sources start drying up or you receive a low-ball buyout offer, you will have the context of knowing what phase you are in and what the associated objectives are. Hence, it will be far easier to analyze the problem and devise a solution. Variations on a theme. The J curve's phases aren't absolute. It's possible that your startup may not follow each phase exactly. As you are probably are too well aware, anarchy can reign during entrepreneurial ventures. At times, so much craziness happens that you don't know which way is up, let alone which phase you're in. Recognize therefore that you may be out of sync with the J curve for a few different reasons. It's possible that things are moving so fast and chaotically that the phases are blending together, and it's difficult to see the borders dividing one phase from another. It's also possible that events are moving at a snail pace, or slower, and you're stuck in a particular phase. It may take months or even years before you can extricate yourself from whatever morass you're in and get back solidly on the J curve path, so you can start definitively moving through the phases in the proper sequential order. I have also seen situations where a company got ahead of itself and then had to back up to a previous phase and finish it properly before refocusing on growth. Both two additional factors may cause an apparent misalignment between your startup and the phases. First, your company or startup may have a de facto business model from its inception instead of waiting to create this model in a later phase. You know with a reasonable degree of certainty how the company will be structured because everyone in your field has the same basic model. Let's say you plan on launching a newspaper or magazine, a truly entrepreneurial endeavor in this digital day and age. Given models used in the past, you're likely going to have one of two revenue models, subscription based or advertising based. While you're going to have to make other decisions related to either of those models later on, you have a pretty good idea of your model earlier than the J curve suggests. Second, you may convince yourself that you have to harvest before you scale. In that heat of the entrepreneurial moment, this may seem to make sense, having slogged through the deep in your J curve, the cold dark winter of the entrepreneurial soul. You may be ready to take the first exit that presents itself. If your finances are stretched to the max and you're physically and emotionally exhausted from trying to get your company off the ground, you may take the first buyout offer, regardless of whether it's a good deal or whether it optimizes the return on the time and effort that you're putting. From your perspective, you lack the willingness and energy to go through the scale process and phase and get to the harvest phase. It seems like it's now or never, even though it probably isn't. Given all this, it's best to treat the J Corp as a guide rather than as a Bible. Or to use another analogy, it functions much like gravity. Sooner or later, the line of the J Corp will pull a startup toward it. How you'll benefit? When I was contemplating talking about this course, I researched the space to see what other literature was out there that could be useful to entrepreneurs, and I was surprised by the paucity of it. It's a pretty thin section of the bookstore. To be sure, there are some good reads available, like the famous, and we talked about it, Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1 has, among other insights, accurate, even if politically incorrect, comments on competition. Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, has some great lessons about the difficulties of startups. Other books on the subject, like Eric Ries's Lean Startup and The Startup Playbook by David Kidler, provide useful insights. The former stresses the importance of being physically conservative, learning from experience, and being sufficiently agile to respond to what's learned. The latter offers a range of entrepreneurial stories, each with its own. Geoffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm, is a startup classic. Paul Graham's essays on startups are incredibly good, as is the Startup Playbook blog by the not so famous now, Sam Altman. By all means, I encourage you to read all of these authors and more. By what I have not seen available and what this book provides is a start to finish map and a series of succinct, ordered steps that will give you the best possible odds of success. Entrepreneurs are like travelers in unexplored territory. It's easy to lose your way or to reach a crossroads and not be sure which way to go. The J curve helps you know the best course of action at a given moment in the life of your startup. As a result, you gain three key benefits. 1. Speed. Entrepreneurs spend hours, days, and weeks engaging in premature activities. An example, trying to grow the business before they've grown or they found the right iteration of the product. By using the J curve, you know that you're supposed to be doing when. This helps you focus on the tasks at hand and move quickly toward goals. Efficiency. As you may have discovered, a huge amount of time is wasted on startups, and time does indeed equal money, especially in startups. People spend a great deal of time on unnecessary or secondary tasks. They also get sidetracked by opportunities that turn out to be dead ends. This is a huge problem in the resource scarce environment for a startup. The J curve helps you conserve time and energy, addressing mission critical issues in every phase and ignoring what's superfluous or what can be better addressed later. 3. Confidence. More than anything else, the six-phase model allows you to make moves that are appropriate for your startup stage. Even the most outwardly confident entrepreneurs can be plagued by doubt and uncertainty. Being in uncharted territory has that effect on people. With a map in hand, however, you can move forward knowing that you're doing the right thing. Before moving on to an in-depth look at the J-curve's first phase, I'd like you to consider a list of the most common mistakes entrepreneurs make as they launch, build, and sustain their startups. Perhaps you made some of these errors in the past, or you know someone who did. Perhaps you weren't even aware they were errors. Whatever the case, startups are vulnerable to all the following mistakes, and as you'll discover, you can avoid or overcome them through an understanding of the J curve. Coming up with a great startup idea and moving forward, certain that the idea alone will make you rich. Not choosing your co-founders wisely. Raising money from the wrong sources. Spending too much money too quickly after initial product success. Underestimating the amount of money you want to raise at the very beginning. Taking too long to release your product. Failing to listen closely to what the market is saying or doing relative to your product. Falling victim to love is blind syndrome, refusing to change anything about your beloved product despite negative data. Refusing to create a series of iterations based on customer feedback. Keeping your initial success a secret, out of fear that you'll give a competition's an edge. Accepting a low-ball offers as your company begins to grow. Scaling before nailing the business model. Not getting the right people with the right skills into specialized roles required for scaling. Being unable or unwilling to make the hard decisions about how to maximize the return on your startup. Said this, my fellow beloved, dear students, we finished the introduction to the J curve. Please try to review the content and go to your weekly activity. Any questions? Feel free to contact me. Thank you for listening and have a great day. Goodbye.